Bechoros Daf Mem, we're continuing with the mumim, the blemishes in an animal that allow one to eat his bechor if it's considered a mum. If an animal has two beitzim in one pouch, according to everybody, that's a mum. But if it's two pouches with one beitza, there's a big machlokes. The Tanna Kama says that's a mum and you could shech the animal, you could eat it. Rabbi Shmuel says it's not considered a mum because you should know that there's another beitza there somewhere. And according to Rabbi Kiva, he's somewhere in between. He says, we'll give it a chance. You could medically make the other beitza descend, and if you could do that, then it's not a mum. But if you went ahead and you shechted the animal, and you found the other beitza inside its body, then you should know this animal was a balmum, and you can eat it. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to Rabbi Kiva, you're actually feeding Klal Yisrael kachim outside of the Beis Hamikdash. It's not true. It's not a mum. Says Rabbi Kiva, and you're wasting Klal Yisrael's money by not allowing them to eat this. And now we go to the next Mishnah, which discusses mumim in the legs and the forelegs of an animal. There's a big difference between the foreleg of an animal and the hind leg of an animal. If an animal has 3 forelegs instead of 2, or he's missing a foreleg, that's a mum, and you could shech the animal. But if he has an extra hind leg, or he's missing a hind leg, that creates a treifa, and it's usher to eat an animal that's a treifa. There's something called a kalut. That's the hoof of the animal. Instead of being a certain shape, pointy, it has a round shape like a donkey. Even if it's split in 2, it's a mum, and you could shech that animal. Shachol means that the thigh bone was pulled out of its socket, but the ligaments remain intact, because if the ligaments are deteriorated, that we learned in Chulin is a treifa, you're not allowed to eat it anyways. Sorua is where one limb is larger than the other limb, as we're going to see later on. One eye is larger than the other. Over here we're talking about a leg, so one leg is longer or shorter than the other leg. It makes it balmum. If the bone is chipped to a point where you can see it visibly from the outside, you see the skin indenting in, that's a mum, and you could shech the bechor and eat it. Says the Mishnah, if a hand, the foreleg or the hind leg broke, even though you can't see the break visibly, but you see the animal limping, that's a visible mum, and you could shech the animal on that. And this is where the Chachamim, the first set of Chachamim, said their things, and they agreed to Ayala. And from here on, Chachamim, these are the second set of Chachamim, and they said that if the socket of the eye of an animal is the same shape of that of a human, that's a mum. Now, the shape of the eye itself is very similar to a human. In fact, we say halacha that if a woman gives birth to something that resembles a chay or a behema, and we know that it's a male, then she has the yemei tumah and tahara of a male, 7 days of tumah and then 33 days of tahara. And if it looks like a female, then she gets 14 days of tumah and 66 days of tahara. But if it's a suffix animal, suffix zachar nekeva, but it looks like an animal, then she gets the worst of both worlds. She gets 14 days of tumah, but only up to the day 40 of tahara, meaning another 26 days of tahara instead of 33 days or 66 days if you in fact think it's an akeva. Why? Because this animal-looking thing that she gave birth to has an eye the shape of a human. So you see that the animals have the eye shape of a human, but their sockets are different, and that's what creates the mum. If the mouth of the animal looks like the mouth of a pig, so even if it's not round like a pig, just its upper lip extends above the lower lip, that's a mum. And if most of its tongue, and the Gemara says the talking part of the tongue, meaning the tongue that's not attached to the mouth, so the front part of the tongue, most of that, 51% of that, is removed, that's a mum. Says the Mishnah, if the lower lip, the jaw, extends outwards, according to everybody, that's a mum. But that's only when the actual jaw bone sticks out and not just the lip protruding outwards. Now, if it's just the lip that protrudes outwards, it's not a mum for an animal, but it is a mum for a kohen, because a kohen needs to look like his forefather Aaron. Says the Mishnah that if the ear of an animal is double, where you see the double all on the bottom of the ear, even though the top of the ear looks like a single ear, that's a mum. But if not, it's not a mum. And Rashi says he doesn't understand why it's not a mum if it's not on the bottom, doesn't look like 2 ears on the bottom. At the end of the day, it looks like 2 ears. The the tail of an animal that resembles that of a pig, it makes it a mum. In other words, if it's round, sheep that doesn't have 3 vertebrae in its tail is a mum, and a goat that doesn't have 2 vertebrae in its tail is a mum. If the bones of his mouth, the jaw, and his leg are small, and the opening, in other words, the mouth is small, the leg is small, but it fits the size of the bone, that's not a mum. But if it doesn't fit the size of the bone, they're not proportionate, then it's a mum. Says the Mishnah. We're talking about warts. So really there's 4 types of warts. When the Torah says yabeles, and that's a mum, it's referring to a wart that has a bone. When the Mishnah talks about a mum, gomor, which you're allowed to shecht on, it's talking about a wart in the black part of the eye, in the pupil of the eye. And if there's a wart in the white part of the eye, that we said yesterday that there's no mum in the white part of the eye. However, if it has hair in the white part of the eye, then it's disgusting, most, and you cannot bring it as a carbon. If there's a wart on the rest of the body without a bone, that is not a mum, because that's just tiltul, it's just extra hanging skin. If one eye is larger than the other eye, so says the Mishnah, if the small eye is the size of a duck, or the large one is the size of a calf, it has to either or, then that's sarua, we said, and that's a mum. If one ear is larger than the other ear, where you can tell by yourself, you don't have to measure it, that's also a mum. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, if one of the beitzim is double the size of the other beitzah, that's a mum. According to Chachamim, even if the other one, the second one, is the size of a small bean, that's not a mum. And finally, the tail of an animal has to come to its joint. What joint? The joint that's visible by a camel. In other words, the top joint and not the lower joint. And if it doesn't come to the joint, then that's a mum. Have a wonderful day.